Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar from LGC Axio Proficiency Testing. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today to a webinar called Verifying Vegan, and it's a webinar about how laboratories can maintain pace with the authentication of vegan food. This is a great hot topic at the moment and one that we're really excited to explore today with you all. So thank you for joining. We hope that you find today's webinar informative and valuable in your work and your knowledge base. So just a short introduction from myself. My name is James Sizer and I'm the Global Senior Brand Manager for LGC Axio Proficiency Testing. And I'll be hosting today's webinar, but more importantly, I'm delighted to invite a couple of speakers. So I will introduce those in just one moment. To start things off though, let's look at today's topic, which as I mentioned is an exciting one, definitely a hot topic in the world of scientific testing, but also in the world of consumer trends and behaviors. I think it's obvious to everybody at the moment that there is a growing agenda around the consciousness of animal exploitation, and I think it's an important agenda. It's one that has a great deal of focus in both news outlets as well as in just consumer interest and the spread of knowledge, behaviors, and attitudes online especially. As our populations become more conscious of animal exploitation, it's known that consumers are making a move to avoid the consumables that have come from animals. Namely, this is the trend towards veganism. It may start with vegetarianism, but ultimately we are now making some big moves towards veganism. And those trends are affecting consumer choices, but also manufacturing choices. Branding choices, every type of choice that affects the business or the consumption of goods is now being affected by these behaviors and attitudes. So this is affecting things such as accessories, clothes, makeup, medication, and perhaps most obviously food and to some extent beverages. So I think the role of verifying vegan, if you like, is becoming big news, but also big business. So today it's important that we take a look at the role that laboratories play in that move and in those trends, and supporting consumers in making those decisions safely and with confidence. So ultimately, what does this consumption shift mean for the laboratories carrying out food testing and authentication worldwide? So this is the topic that we're excited to explore today and hopefully learn a little bit more about. There's some really great stuff in this webinar, so I'm excited to move on and introduce our two speakers. So firstly, we're going to be joined by Valerie Badin. So Valerie is our Global Product Manager here at LGC Axio Proficiency Testing, and from a microbiology background, is also an expert in bringing through the very latest in proficiency testing products. So Valerie is going to spend some time exploring the background to these vegan trends and how we're looking at it from our proficiency testing and the role that we have in supporting laboratories around the world. So I look forward to hearing more from Valerie on that. We're also very privileged today to be joined by a guest speaker, and that is Mario Guadagno. And Mario is joining us from Thermo Fisher Scientific, our good friends there, where Mario is the R&D Senior Staff Scientist, really focusing in on next generation sequencing solutions. So Mario has joined us today to really spend a little bit of time looking specifically at the latest in methods for this kind of testing, but also looking at the way technology is going to work going forward, because there are some really exciting developments in there. So following our two wonderful speakers today, I will quickly recap on why we're talking to you around what do we have in the Axio Proficiency testing portfolio that could support you with your testing needs, but also a little bit about why proficiency testing is important. And there should be an opportunity for some questions at the end. So if you think of anything as we move through today's presentation, please do use the questions function on GoToWebinar to submit questions. And I really do hope that we'll have some time to tackle those at the end with our experts here today. So I think that's enough from me for the time being. So I'm going to hand over to Valerie to start our presentation today on verifying vegan and looking at how laboratories can maintain pace with the authentication of vegan food. Valerie.
Thank you, James. Thanks. So just before we start, and to be clear on what we are referring to in this webinar, we know that for some the term vegan encompasses other consideration, especially ethical ones, but for the purpose of this webinar, we will call vegan the foods that exclude any ingredient from animal origins, such as eggs, meat, dairy products, honey, etc. So the market for vegan food is being driven by a range of factors that include ethical factors, that James has mentioned previously, with the raising awareness of animal cruelty, animal rights, and also the willingness to prevent any kind of exploitation of animals by humans. There are also some environmental factors, as the negative impact of the meat industry is well known. In 2016, a study from the University of Oxford found that adopting vegan diet at a global level would cut food-related greenhouse gas emission by 70% and 63% if there was a global adoption of a vegetarian diet. Also important are the health factors for some of the people who go for a vegan diet. And some studies have shown that there are a lot of benefits in a well-planned vegan diet. Such diets reduce the risk of heart diseases, cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. And vegan diet is also an answer to the growing population that are lactose intolerant. It's also a way for some people suffering from milk or egg allergy to easily identify products that would be suitable for them. So the growing interest in vegan and vegetarian diet is quite dramatic. In the UK, some recent estimates suggest that today 1.5 million people, which means approximately 2.25% of the UK population, follow a vegan diet. This is a tenfold increase compared to 2014. So in less than 10 years, the number of vegan people was multiplied by 10. 3.1 million are vegetarians, and another 2.5 million are pescatarians. That means that they would avoid meat but still eat fish. This means that overall, around 14% of the adults in the UK do not consume meat, with an additional 12%, 6.5 million approximately, saying that they intend to cut meat from their diets in 2021. Also important to note that in 2020, all the major UK supermarket brands had created their own vegan ranges, and that those range of products are distributed very widely. Next slide, please. So this was the situation in the UK, but I would say quite obviously the situation is quite comparable in Europe in general, where in 2020, 4% of consumers stated that they were vegan. In the US, the number of vegans is estimated to represent between 2 and 3% of the population. I think it's just important to mention here that it's quite difficult to have an accurate estimate of the proportion of the population who have a vegan or vegetarian diet, as the data can vary very significantly between different studies. But 2 to 3% seems a reasonable number. What is more tangible, however, is that the global vegan food market has reached a value of more than 15 billion US dollars in 2020. And the market is expected to grow at a CAGR of 9% between 2021 and 2026, reaching a value of over 26 billion US dollar by 2026. It would certainly be an error to think that those numbers reflect exactly the growth of the vegan population. And not all plant-based foods are meant for vegans only and consumed exclusively by vegans, of course. But because many of those foods target some people who at least occasionally eat some meat. But still, it's a good indicator of the pace at which the vegan population is growing. So the sales of vegan and vegetarian products are soaring as consumers, whether they are true vegan or not, rethink their consumption of animal protein and tend to opt for plant-based alternatives. In 2019, UK companies successfully applied for 107 trademarks for vegan supermarket products, and this is the double compared to the prior year. That includes, of course, very different products, including dairy-free ice cream, meat-free burgers, and plant-based cheese alternatives. This demand is being driven as much by meat eaters as vegan and vegetarian, as up to 19% of consumers follow a so-called flexitarian diet. So that means basing their meals largely on plants, but still occasionally consuming some animal products. Well, you only have to look at the menu of a fast food restaurant to see that the majority of them offer some very trendy plant-based burgers. And some studies have shown that almost 90% of the Impossible Burger, so it's one of the popular vegan alternative to burger, so 90% that are sold at the fast food chains are actually being purchased by meat eaters. So what does vegan mean from a legal perspective, and are there any clear rules and definition for vegan? The explosion of the popularity of vegan and vegetarian products has led to significant changes, of course, in terms of marketing regulations, but also product compliance and product safety. In October 2020, there was a proposal made to the European Parliament to ban the use of words like sausage, burger, steak, and any term that is strongly related to meat to describe vegan and vegetarian products. And this proposition was rejected by the European Parliament and was, of course, considered as a big victory by the leaders in the plant-based industry. Conversely, and surprisingly, the European Parliament also voted to ban references to dairy products for plant-based foods. This means that terms like almond milk, yogurt style, or cream imitation are now prohibited. Some exceptions will still be made for instance, peanut butter or coconut milk, since those names have been in use for decades. In the future, it's also very likely that designation for non-dairy products may not even use terms such as milk taste, cheese style, or substitute. So an even stronger regulation for those dairy terms. So obviously there has been some very strong opposition to those decisions. The proposal to prohibit the use of meat-related name was made following the pressure from the meat lobby and agricultural associations, who said that otherwise, meat-eating consumer could be confused and buy vegetarian or vegan products instead of meat products. The European Consumer Organization, BEUC, conducted a survey of consumer attitudes and found that a majority of consumers believe that the use of meaty names should be permitted at the condition that the products are very clearly labeled as vegan or vegetarian. So the BEUC argued that the use of meaty names on plant-based products will actually make it easier for consumers to know how they should integrate those products in their meal. It was also agreed that it is very important that consumers can clearly identify these products as vegetarian or vegan, and that there is no risk that they are misled about the nutritional quality. For dairy products, it appeared more important to exclude any risk of confusion between products that have different origins, composition, and nutritional values. An important milestone for vegan is that in March 2021, so just a few months ago, the International Organization for Standardization, so ISO, have, I would say, finally published the ISO 23662. So this is the ISO standard for vegan products. So this ISO standard specifies the definition and the technical criteria that food and food ingredients, including additives, flavorings, enzymes, and carriers, have to fulfill to be suitable for vegetarian, including ovo and lacto-vegetarians, or vegans, as well as for food labeling and claims. So this standard is applicable to business-to-business communication, to the food trade, and to food labeling and claims. The definitions and technical criteria of the standard apply only post-harvest or post-collecting. And also important to note that the criteria such as human safety, environmental safety, socioeconomic considerations such as fair trade, animal welfare, etc., religious or ethical beliefs, and the characteristic of packaging materials are not in the scope of this ISO 23662 standard. So despite the publication of this standard, the definition of vegan can still be unclear. Well, of course, especially on ethical consideration, but there are still some significant questions around typically cross-contamination risk and their consequence. Among the many different vegan organizations, some have positively welcomed the ISO 23662, while some others reject it very fiercely. The European Vegetarian Union, which is an umbrella organization of vegan and vegetarian associations in Europe, which had been lobbying for definition since 2008, has proposed a definition saying that in the manufacture, preparation, treatment, or placing on the market of foods that are labeled as vegetarian or vegan, appropriate precautions must be taken to avoid cross-contamination from meat or animal products. Another association, the Vegan Society, does not require food producers to prove that their products are 100% free from cross-contamination in order to get their vegan trademark certification. Instead, a company must demonstrate that they make all possible efforts to minimize cross-contamination from animal substances as far as reasonably practicable and possible. So a rather pragmatic approach. Driven by consumer demand and by risk management required by the industry, a number of guidance, regulations, certifications are emerging. So at consumer level, various vegan labels can help consumers in their choice through the vegan certification procedure can greatly differ from one organization to another. At the industry level, the BRCGS plant-based standard was developed in response to the growing demand for plant-based products. The standard is based on a comprehensive management system approach to ensure that plant-based products are free from material of animal origin. This standard is an example of the direction industry is taking to protect brands through claim verification standards. Sites that are certified to this BRCGS plant-based standard shall undertake a documented risk assessment of all ingredients and inputs to identify potential materials of animal origin. So this is the basis for acceptance of ingredients and inputs intended for use in plant-based products, as well as for any testing procedures and processes adopted for supplier approval and monitoring. Any ingredient or input that is intended for a plant-based product must be assessed based on the risk. The production site must consider the result of sampling and testing, and also the certificates of analysis from an ISO-accredited laboratory in order to achieve this. The site must set clear parameters for acceptance and testing frequency, which will be regularly reviewed. The site must also have processes in place to assess information on historical and developing threats to the supply chain, which may present a risk of adulteration or substitution of ingredients or inputs, for instance, fraudulent raw materials. And the site may incorporate routine testing to identify adulterants into the assessment. If testing within the supply chain is comprehensive and specifically focused on potential fraud issues, then the likelihood of adulteration will be greatly reduced. So testing of the supply chain, but also the finished product is crucial to mitigate the risk of adulteration, and laboratories have an important role to play to ensure the quality of products for consumers. Several state-of-the-art methods and techniques are available to laboratories to guarantee the vegan characteristic of the product, and it's important for the labs to opt for the most appropriate method. So I'm therefore delighted to hand over to Mario Gadagno from Thermo Fisher will review and explain the different technologies available to laboratory. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Okay, so thank you very much to introduce this topic. During the next few slides, I will be talking about the use of DNA-based methods and how can we use this type of methods to ensure about the content of the food and to ensure about this type of vegan food. And I will show some examples of some news that came in this field in the last months or last years, let's say. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So why to care about this vegan mislabeling? So it's as Valerie was saying, it's a very growing speed market, and most of the brands are really introducing this type of products, and some of the products, as I will be talking also during the presentation, may present some challenges in terms to guarantee that they are free from animal-based products, because nowadays we are talking about very complex supply chains with ingredients that can come from several different places in the world, different geographies, with different types of production. So it can be really complex in terms of the supply chain, and it's important to understand if we have the right tools to monitor and to ensure that the final product is really a vegan product, because normally it's the final product that is analyzed and that we want to make it free of any animal content. So about using DNA fingerprints, that's what we are going to talk a little bit more during the presentation. So why using this type of fingerprints? It's because DNA each organism, each species contain a unique DNA signature. So it's something that we can take advantage not only to look about animal content, but also if we want to identify that animal origin by identifying the species, for example, as we will see also during the presentation. During this presentation, I will focus mostly on PCR and NGS, as you will see. So DNA is very, very sensitive. It's probably one of the most sensitive and specific molecule that we can look for in terms of PCR detection, which is probably the most common DNA-based method used by most of the labs that are already providing this type of service for vegan food, or looking for particular species of meat or fish or other animals. Also, if we are looking about PCR, we are looking about detection methods. When we use an NGS approach, we are looking about DNA sequencing, which again, we are taking one of the most, what can be considered probably the gold standard for species identification in terms of DNA-based method. So when using an NGS-based approach, so next generation sequencing approach, we are taking advantage of this really powerful method, as we will see also during the presentation. And we know that using DNA is really, as I was saying, the basis to identify the species, and is probably, if not the only method, but it's really a broad method to be able to identify and to authenticate ingredients and to look about whatever the type of organism that we are looking for. And it's important, starting to this topic, to look about identification versus detection, which is sometimes it is used as sometimes as a synonym, but there are some differences that are important to understand, because depending on what you are looking for, you may want to use a method that is more suitable for a detection or more suitable for an identification. And when we are looking about detection, we are trying to answer to this specific question, which is a specific species group in my sample? Is there any animal DNA in my sample? For example, if we are talking about a vegan product, so that's the type of question that we are trying to answer, knowing that we will have a result that is a binary result, so it's a positive or negative result, so detection or no detection. And I would say that in most cases it's real-time PCR, the method that is being used for this type of question about detection. When we look about identification, we want to know what is present. If we identify or if we detect, let's say, that animal DNA is present in a specific food product, we may want to identify that that animal DNA. Is it a meat? Is it a fish? Is it a mollusk? Is it a crustacean? What kind of animal is it? What kind of species is it? And this can be quite important depending on how we are using this type of DNA methods for vegan analysis, but also to try to look all over the supply chain and to try to understand if we have on the final product some kind of animal DNA, in which step of the supply chain this could happen. What is the ingredient that contains DNA that was added to the product to produce this type of positive result for animal DNA? So when we are looking about identification, and today we will be looking about sequencing, and about sequencing we are looking, in this presentation we will be looking about next generation sequencing, because we are talking about complex products containing multiple ingredients. So it's more complicated, let's say, to identify the different species present if we want, but we may want to use also Sanger sequencing, which is not so much appropriate for a final product containing multiple ingredients, because it should be used, Sanger sequencing should be used on single species product, which can be more complicated to use because of the complexity of the food products containing multiple ingredients. When we look about PCR and NGS, so we will be focusing more on NGS, on the identifications part, we are looking about a targeted or an untargeted, or what we call sometimes a targeted untargeted approach. So let's try just to introduce a little bit of these concepts that we will be talking in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. When we look about a specific target, and the target can be a species or can be a group, it can be detection of beef, it can be a detection of tuna, for example, it can be detection of a specific shrimp, for example, just trying to cover some specific animal groups, or it can be animal DNA. Okay, it can be some kind of animal DNA. When we look about, and this usually we can do it using real-time PCR, looking and obtaining a fluorescence signal. If it's positive, if it's negative, we have no fluorescence. So that's how it works. When we look about next generation sequencing, so about NGS, and we will see this also in the coming slide, we are talking about, we may have two different strategies. One is a completely untargeted approach, where we look about the whole DNA content of the food product. Or we can be looking about some particular groups and targeting, for example, the group of mammals, the group of birds, the group of mollusks or crustaceans, or on the mollusk side, the cephalopods. We can try to target these type of groups, but also trying to detect any kind of species within this group. Okay, so it is some kind of targeted group, but at the same time, we are not targeting any particular species, but we are able to identify that species if we have a positive signal for DNA. So it's, and the result that we obtain from an NGS-based approach is no longer a fluorescence signal. So we are no longer talking about fluorescence if it's positive and no fluorescence if it's a negative result. We are talking about millions of sequences that are generated and produced in a text file, sometimes containing millions of sequences with more than 1 or 2 gigabytes, that can make the analysis a little bit more complicated, but having the appropriate bioinformatic pipeline, it becomes very easy to identify this, to use this method. And it's very interesting to see how standardization is moving on this field about the use of DNA-based method. Because for standardization, and if we look about the ISO, and looking about ISO and AOAC, just to mention two of the let's say the standardization bodies, let's say AOAC and ISO, we can look that at the ISO level, we already have two general, one published in 2019, defining the general requirements how to use PCR for animal species detection in food and food-based products. And we have presently also an ISO draft that is ongoing, that probably, if everything goes well, will be published during next year, so during 2022, which define also how to use DNA sequencing methods for animal species identification, namely including next generation sequencing. So standardization is also following these new technologies, these new developments, to try to set standards and to try to standardize the way as the different labs that are looking about, for example, vegan analysis can use it according to these general requirements. Also at AOAC, we presently is working with the first standard method performance requirements, presently dedicated to spices and botanicals, but more probably this is the first step to be in the near future to be enlarged also to animal species. So this is really important that this is ongoing. It's very important for the labs that this kind of documents, official documents, are being published so that they provide the guidelines, very important for them to use the methods, and additionally with all the proficiency tests that are starting to be available in the market for detection of animal species by PCR or NGS. Altogether, it's are very, very important tools for the quality management at the lab environment. Regarding now moving to PCR and NGS, and to look about the target regions that usually, and now target regions, I mean the DNA regions that usually are looked for when we use, regardless if it's PCR or if it is NGS. So we try to use, if we are using a PCR-based approach, we look for specific regions that we call more or less universal, because what we want to use is in some way to look about those universal regions that are present in almost all kind of animal species, because that's what we want to cover, is as much as possible all the animal species, knowing that we don't have we want to be as close as possible to 100% of all animal species, but it's something that we are not able to reach completely. So there is always a very, very small part of animals that will be not detected by these methods, even if they are stated as universal ones. What is very important here, so besides the genes that usually are used, and we are talking mostly about cytochrome oxidase, mitochondrial genes, let's say, are probably the ones that are mostly used. Cytochrome oxidase, cytochrome B, 16S, 12S. So these 4 genes are the ones that are mostly used, regardless if it's PCR or NGS. But what is very important is that the strategy that is set at the lab, PCR or NGS, is based on a mini amplicon strategy. So something around 100 base pair, between 100 to 150 base pair. And it's very important because if we are looking about highly processed food, the DNA present on those highly processed food is highly fragmented, and it's very important to have the method adjusted to be able to amplify very short fragments because of the fragmentation of the DNA normal in a production of highly processed products. Now going in more detail about NGS and about the 2 different ways to use NGS in terms of target sequencing or untarget sequencing. And here it depends on the strategy of each lab and on the equipment that is present on site and the experience of each one of the lab. We can look about this target sequencing approach, which usually we call it a metabarcoding approach, which means that we extract the DNA from the sample, we amplify by PCR using universal primers to try to maximize as much as possible the coverage of the different species, but amplifying multiple DNA regions. So those regions that I just mentioned before, if we are looking about meat, it's mostly cytochrome oxidase, 16S or 12S rDNA. If we are looking about fish, seafood or others, we can include also the cytochrome B, which is very much used for the detection of fish species, for example. And once we have this amplification of the different regions, then we run an NGS analysis, and we are able to not only to detect if there is any animal DNA, but also to tell you what are the species that are there. And this can be very important, as we will see in the coming slides, if we are trying to look about the supply chain and if that information is really important. Because nowadays, in a complex food product, it's very, very much normal that many ingredients, sometimes some ingredients that we don't know or we never thought about how they are produced, some of them, they are animal-based. Some inks, for example, can be obtained from some mollusks. So, and sometimes we are not looking about this in particular, and we may have a positive signal for animal DNA, and it's very important to try to understand where this DNA is coming from. And here, identifying the species by sequencing can be very, very, very useful. The other approach, the untargeted sequencing, is basically extracting the DNA from the sample and without any kind of PCR, looking directly for the DNA. So sequencing directly the DNA that is obtained from the sample. What can be the disadvantage of using this second approach based on this mostly long read sequencing approach with some specific NGS instruments? It's because if we are talking about a vegan product, it is mostly based on plant material. So if we use this untargeted sequencing, most of the DNA will be plant DNA. And sometimes it can be more tricky if you have a very low content of animal DNA in the product to detect the animal DNA on that whole amount of plant DNA that is produced if you use this untargeted sequencing approach. Because when you use the target sequencing, you already amplify the animal DNA. So you really artificially amplify the signal of animal DNA if it is in your product. So these are the two differences. So when using NGS, what are we going to do? We are going not only to detect, but to identify if we detect a meat, a fish, or a seafood, what is that species? The workflow can be a 24-hour workflow. It's more expensive than PCR. It can be more universal because you can include many different regions to look for. And it's very important because you can be able to correlate a possible result with the food ingredient. So it can give you an indication to monitor at specific points your supply chain, because if you identify a fish species or a meat species, then you can look where in the supply chain this can come from. And it's also very appropriate for faint positive signals, because if you have a faint positive signal, you can always identify the species to confirm that it is a true positive or a false positive result. And when using PCR, so when we are going to use PCR, it's quicker. Of course, it's very much inexpensive. It gives you a positive, negative result, but you are not able to correlate with any food ingredient. So you just know that you have DNA, animal DNA in your product, but you don't know, you have any idea what is that animal DNA. And it can be more tricky if you have very faint positive signals, because you may need to do some additional confirmation to confirm that they are really true positives and not a false positive result. So depending on what you are looking for, one method, NGS or PCR, can be more appropriate with this type of advantages and disadvantage that I just spoke. And that's what I had to say in the technical part. And now I give the floor to James.
Thank you, Mario. I think that was fascinating stuff, and I think it's fair to say that this is an exciting and fast developing subject area that unfortunately we can't cover absolutely everything in today's session. So we'll return to this topic in future webinars as well. So thank you, Mario, for really giving us a taste of some of the incoming future for testing in this vegan arena and beyond. So I'm here quickly to talk to you about the role of proficiency testing and how Axio proficiency testing can support vegan testing in particular. So Axio proficiency testing has recently released a brand new sample to respond to the consumer behaviors, and this is sample PT-FC848, and it's our vegan food proficiency testing sample as part of our food chemistry scheme, which is called QFCS. It comes in a quantity of 10 grams and it is supplied as food. I'll come on to some detail in terms of the matrix in a moment. And of course, its target analyte is the presence or absence of animal DNA. It's worth flagging that this first sample will be available for its dispatch on the 14th of June 2021. So it is approaching rapidly. So it is worth acting now to secure participation if you are interested in obtaining proficiency testing samples for vegan food. Just as we've talked about these being some of the early steps, both in regulations, both in plant-based standards, etc., but also now in the exciting developments in PCR and NGS testing. This is, of course, I believe, the first step in proficiency testing for vegan food, and this is by no means the end of the journey. This is the beginning. So what I would say is, firstly, this is a sample well worth looking into. You can find out more on lgcstandards.com/Axio, and where you'll be able to order the sample online, but also download application forms should that be your favored method of participation. Additionally, you can contact us via email, and I'll include some details at the end of this presentation, or by phone by contacting your local offices, and we'd be happy to help. A little bit more on the sample. Just as some of the demand for standards and industry regulations are coming from the route to market or the major consumer-based businesses, this sample actually stems from demand from the industry. So we had a number of requests, but primarily from a major UK supermarket chain, where they were seeing a huge increase in vegan labeled products. They knew that they had to maintain their brand reputation, their security. They had to avoid any costly recalls. And so they started to integrate vegan testing into their quality management processes and systems. And so that demand led to a demand for a proficiency testing sample, which we worked very closely with our customers to develop. So that is the result of that is this sample, the PT-FC848. And the first round of that will be available in a vegetable soup format. However, what we do is we look at our matrix options, we look at our formats on a regular basis, and we work very closely with our customers, both on incoming requests, but also in the form of focus groups and forums to really understand what is needed. And so if you have any information or demands that you'd like to share with us, please do so, and we will consider that for the future. But first, coming up is, yes, this vegan food proficiency testing sample in a vegetable soup format, available for first dispatch on the 14th of June 2021. So that's the latest sample, so please do participate if it suits your needs and matches your demand for testing. So just a quick recap on the role of proficiency testing and how it supports laboratories' quality systems. I just want to quickly flag here that we explored this topic in quite a lot of detail, taking a closer look at 3 of the most common culprits for contamination in a recent blog or industry insights article that we published on our website. I do advise going and reading that. It will only take 5 minutes, but it will give you some really strong insights into what's going on in that area, and also explain the role of proficiency testing in supporting vegan food testing. So visit lgcstandards.com/Axio, and you'll see the link to that in the header bar there, and you can read more. So please do head over there and learn a little bit more about this topic. Many of you will be very familiar with this, but proficiency testing is indeed a critical tool in ensuring laboratory performance, particularly in ensuring that performance is both consistent across, for instance, multiple sites, but also across a lengthy time frame. But it will also help you to have confidence that your measurements are accurate and reliable. Proficiency testing is referenced in ISO IEC 17025 as a key external quality assessment tool. And in actual fact, it can support any laboratory, whether they are accredited to 17025, seeking accreditation to that level, or more importantly, perhaps responsible for meeting industry regulations or consumer safety requirements. So proficiency testing can work with any laboratory, really, that's looking at vegan food product analysis. And the benefits of participating regularly in proficiency testing programs, particularly from Axio, are many. And they include things like fulfilling those accreditation requirements, demonstrating your competency to customers and regulatory bodies. And I think that could connect well with things like the BRCGS standards that are being published. It's a quick way of ensuring that you can rapidly demonstrate your competency. It enables you to compare your results with laboratories carrying out comparative analysis all around the world. So Axio is a truly global proficiency testing provider, and one of the great benefits of working with us is that you get to connect your results and your testing with laboratories all over the world. There are no limits around borders or reach. So it's a really good opportunity to gain some insight into industry standards levels and testing results. Proficiency testing can be a way of managing risk through early warning of potential problems. So if you get some difficult results coming back from your proficiency testing, it gives you an opportunity to identify any potential problems and work to solve or eliminate those, and therefore limit the risk to your work going forward. It's an opportunity to verify your methods and instrumentation. So, you know, recapping on some of the work that Mario shared with us, there is an opportunity to combine proficiency testing with your deployment of specific methods or use of particular instrumentation to really make sure that you're getting the very best results, the right results, and the accurate results, and most importantly, you have confidence in those results when you share them for whatever purpose you need. And finally, it can also be a useful tool in educating and training staff. So using proficiency testing samples, for example, as a way of really getting your staff and team members familiar with a particular method of testing, or familiar with the use and preparation of a particular samples. So again, the benefits of proficiency testing and regular participation in proficiency testing are many. Axio is part of the LGC family and very proud to be so. So Axio proficiency testing under LGC has been leading the direction of the PT industry for over 40 years. And what we mean by that is that multiple members of our team, multiple aspects of our work have been shared and used to influence the future of quality assurance. So whether that's participation in things like committees, or whether it's simply in working with our customers to ensure that proficiency testing is staying up to date with the latest developments in any given industry, we've really brought our knowledge and our technical expertise to bear in those areas. We design all our schemes to meet future needs, and this is something I can't stress enough, really, that proficiency testing is designed to support existing or in development laboratory quality systems. We can only do that by working very closely with our customers and hearing from them. So if you have any needs, whether you're a customer or a future customer or are just interested, please do share them with us, because that is how we develop our programs to meet needs of any given laboratory. So we need to hear from you, and we make sure that we take great pride in trying to stay ahead of future needs and incoming regulations, for example. So we help you consistently deliver quality products or meet your accreditation or industry standards. We talk a lot about confidence, but really all that proficiency testing is, it's about inspiring confidence in your work and your results. And so we do believe that by working with Axio proficiency testing, you can have the assurance that your decision making is as informed as possible, reliable as possible, and of course, effective. So a little bit more before we move on to some questions. We might have just a couple of minutes, but please look into us a little bit more and discover more about our portfolio, especially this vegan food testing sample at lgcstandards.com/Axio. And of course, contact us online at axio@lgcgroup.com, and we'll be happy to share more. You can also visit the website to discover the details of our local offices in the Contact Us section, and we'd love to hear from you. Importantly, please do join both Axio proficiency testing and of course our guests today from Thermo Fisher online. Both of our organizations and teams share a great deal of the latest information, insights and portfolio details on LinkedIn particularly, so just search for Axio or search for Thermo Fisher there, but also on Twitter. So same again, discover us online, join our communities, hear from us, tell us about your experiences, and should you have any specific requirements, just let us know in any medium that you see fit. Similarly, myself, Valerie, and Mario are all on LinkedIn, so just have a quick search for our names and you will find us. And we'd love to hear from you, I'm sure. I think all of us are really keen to engage with people, share our insights and knowledge, and learn more from you, even more importantly. So thank you very much. It's been a little bit of a breathless presentation. We've had a lot to fit in. So an exciting one and an area of really interesting developments. I'm just looking, and at the moment we don't have a huge volume of questions, and in fact we have even less time on our hands. So what I would say is this is an area that is just getting started, and so if you do have any emerging questions, if this has inspired any thoughts when you go away and listen to this, whether you are listening to it live or downloaded, please do reach out, contact any of us, and like I said, on social media you can get in touch with any of us directly also. So at this stage then, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our speakers, Valerie Badan from Axio Proficiency Testing and Mario Guadagno from Thermo Fisher Scientific. So thank you both for your time. And of course, finally, thank you very much everybody for joining us today. We hope to hear from you soon. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and good luck in all of your laboratory testing. Thank you.